question. And so remembering that this is an evolving thing, finding your journey, finding your career is evolving. And so to let it evolve and then kind of talk about what that's meant for me and how it's landed me where I am right now, which is in a position I could see growing in for the rest of my life. So I'd love to kind of just chat a little bit about that, because I think people tend to land in their first job and feel scared to make a change. And it's just so important to follow all of the things you learn and all the value that you glean from each position you're in to create the life that you want. And I think that's really important. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, let's just jump right into it. I'm going to do a little intro, which maybe we'll keep, maybe we won't, but we'll see. So welcome to Lady Scientists IRL. I'm Lee Zink, and I'm here with Katie Venichuk, who's going to be talking us through her journey with science and wellness and exploring. Katie, why don't you talk to us a little bit about who you are, what you're doing now, and get us going with how you got there.
Hi, Lise. Yes. Thank you, first of all, for inviting me to be on the show. It's such a pleasure. And I think it's great what you're doing here. And I hope that you reach lots of ears and eager audiences, and that it's helpful to people as they kind of progress in their own journey and their own careers. So my name is Katie. I am a former environmental engineer turned natural science and wellness educator. And that's a little bit of an unusual title. So I'll just expand a little bit on exactly what that means. And essentially what I do is I bring wellness programs to the masses through the lens of science. So oftentimes we spend a lot of time in nature. It's fairly natural for us to feel as though there are wellness benefits of spending time there. And what I do is I provide a little bit more context around the science and the research that discusses those benefits to help people to lean into the practice and really glean all the benefits of spending time in nature.
Well, that is so exciting to share with people. And I'm sure all, environmental and natural scientists just wish that they were able to use what they learn about the world around us to help people enhance their own lives. Can you talk to us a little bit more about the journey from an environmental engineer and the engineering side of things to more of outreach with science, education, and wellness?
Yes, I'd love to. That's actually very near and dear to my heart, because this journey has been quite dynamic for me landing here. When I graduated from the university, I went to Michigan State University. I have a degree in civil engineering with a specialization in water resources and hydrology. So I had a very technical start. And that was not always something that I anticipated when I was in high school. I didn't take calculus in high school. I didn't take chemistry in high school, but I enjoyed numbers and I was very curious, and I love nature. And that's always been very central to my personality through my entire life. So as I started to explore in college, I found that I was very drawn to the technical side of understanding the natural world. Learning chemistry felt a bit like learning the language, right? The language
Absolutely.
of the earth. Yeah. So I really was drawn and taken in by that. And that's how I started to study engineering. And upon graduation, I've entered many different fields with that degree. I started off working in the private sector as an environmental specialist, working with old leaking contaminated gas stations and land remediation and soil sampling and all kinds of things like that. From there, I transitioned into work as a landfill engineer. I spent many years working as a permitting specialist, and what I would do is go out and inspect landfills as they were being constructed. So new cells, we would run samples to ensure that they were being constructed to the highest standards. We would run groundwater samples to ensure that they weren't leaking, and we would do work with the gas monitoring and gas collection systems. I was in that position for a number of years, and I learned a ton about how to discuss complicated technical issues with general audiences and really communicate scientific ideas in a simple way. I learned a lot of really valuable skills. And after a few years, I was ready to just expand and learn something different. I gleaned a lot from that. and I was ready to shift. I didn't quite love spending time on landfills. It's not exactly the most beautiful environment to be, although it is really valuable to see, and it makes you think a little bit deeper about when you throw things away. And from there,
Absolutely.
yeah. And from there, I shifted and I started to work in the world of recycling instead. And recycling was a little bit less technical. It was much more on the side of education, grant writing, and politics. So I spent a lot of time in Lansing. I was one of 4 specialists for the state. I worked a lot with environmental legislation and learning how to write laws, the whole process of how it goes. And I was quite involved with that for a number of years. There were some things that I really wanted to do in my personal life alongside my husband, and the time had come to make another shift. So I was in that position for a number of years. And then my husband and I fulfilled a big dream. We went on a large trip. We went volunteering in Africa. We were in South America for a while. And then we came back and kind of bringing together all of these skills and all of the things I've learned about myself and my personality and the things that light me up and what I want to share with the world. It's drawn me to now open, which has been a journey all its own, and science-based wellness. So that's a lot, but that's kind of it in a nutshell.
I think you broke up when you were saying this new venture. What do you call it?
In Your Element Wellness is what
Okay.
it's called. And it's a small business right now, but we are growing.
Well, that is so exciting and interesting to hear how you went from not a very technical high school background, although I'm sure very strong and ready to take all those courses, really jumping into the technical world as an undergraduate and your first job, moving into policy with your second job for the recycling commissioner, and now more of education and outreach. I was wondering if you could take a little time and contrast the skills and character traits that helped you to succeed in your technical job of the civil engineer to your policy job as a recycling commissioner, and then maybe contrast both of these to the parts of yourself, your personality and skills that you see really being an asset to you in your new venture within your element.
Yes, I'd love to. So, as I mentioned, my first job was very much geared toward regulatory compliance. So there was a thread of connection between what I was doing as a landfill engineer and what I was doing in the world of recycling, and that it was all fairly founded in policy. And a lot of work in the environmental world, you'll find that there's some policy in there somewhere, because you're usually working to protect something, to construct something, and there's usually some baseline that you're working to gear towards to minimize risk to the environment. That's very much a thread of continuity you'll find, at least in the work that I did. And so as an environmental engineer working in the world of landfills, it had a fair amount of solo time. So a lot of time on my own, in my cubicle, working through reports, cross-checking calculations, cross-checking.
Very often, I think when we're presented with science as students, it's either, do this in the lab or look at all these amazing discoveries. But there's so much science to be done that is just ensuring that we're following best practices, we're keeping people safe. And if you have a passion for that, it's a great field to be in.
Absolutely. And I had wonderful coworkers, everyone, I worked for the state of Michigan. So it was a government position, a public sector position. And you often kind of think of regulatory people from the government being kind of lackadaisy and they're just kind of like doing their own thing, bare minimum. I never experienced that. I had a wonderful, wonderful experience working for the government. And in terms of personal life balance, not to kind of go rogue, but it's a great position in that sense of very good hours. I was allotted a really nice vacation time. I was paid a comfortable wage. I even was able to transition to a 4-day week when I began to explore the world of wellness and started to expand into teaching yoga and other things that just lit me up kind of on this other side of life. So just a little bit of a little side note, if you're interested in the regulatory side of things, it often has some really nice work-life balance elements to offer you too.
That's good to know.
Yeah, yeah. I wish I would have known that because I might have landed there sooner. But yeah. So just to answer your original question and the parallels of the two, the environmental engineering position that I was in still called on the ability to public speak. In terms of regulatory engineering, you're often called to public hearings. That's a component of, for example, landfill expansion. You're called to a public hearing to explain to people what's about to happen, and then they have the ability to oppose or ask questions. That's how the process works, right? That's how our law works. And so I was still required to be in that space of being able to public speak. So that was a reality for me. And even as an engineer in the private sector, I found that many times you are still doing a certain level of presentation of your design or whatever it is. So there is a certain level of public speaking involved, at least from my experience. And that really aligned with the recycling side of things, because much of what I was doing in that is providing presentations at environmental conferences. And then on the flip side, I still had that introverted work of sitting, reading through grant applications, writing grants, and kind of being a grant administrator. So there was certain things that aligned there as well. And then to bring that all to where I am right now in the business that I'm currently building and making, I'm calling on so many skills from those first jobs that I enjoyed building to create work that feels meaningful and fulfilling to me. And I think that's so important in terms of acknowledging that careers are a journey. I really enjoy presenting, and that's been a really great skill to bring into what I'm doing now. Being able to communicate those complicated technical ideas in a simple way so people can engage and relate and become a part of it has been meaningful in terms of sharing some of these really incredible research backed frameworks for this nature-based wellness stuff. And let's see. Yeah, being able to move through research papers and understand what you're reading. And so those are
That's
a
skill
few
all
things
in its
that I've
own.
connected. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like I've been talking nonstop. So,
well, I love to hear it. That's the point. We want to hear from you.
Yeah.
I love hearing you bring together those threads of the skills that you use in all these different jobs. I do some demotivation in the work like you're talking about, and I love hearing about the presenting skills and the explaining skills. Tell me a little bit more about your vision for your nature education within your element and the wellness you want to do with that.
Yes, I'd love to. So right now I'm doing a lot of public facing outreach, but as we move through this strange age of COVID, things are starting to shift back, and I meet people who can't really relate to the world of wellness as it's often presented these days. We envision, maybe a young woman in yoga pants sitting on a meditation cushion, and we're like, that's wellness, right? You have to do yoga and be bendy and do all these crazy meditations. To nature is healing. And I feel that there are so many doorways we can open to help people step into this world of wellness and value themselves as a part of that, right? As this like holistic system. And reminding people that we are not machines, we are not computers, we are human organisms. We start as a seed and we grow from there. And so taking care of our health and wellness, especially in this age when we've shifted to such a technology-based structure, right? We spend so much time staring at screens. And in terms of human health, our cardiovascular diseases have gone up, autoimmune problems have gone up, and people are just getting sick. And there's been so many interesting, layers and layers of research out there that advocate that this environmental-based wellness is not just placebo effect question, but I hope that kind of answered it.
Oh, absolutely. No, and you had mentioned that before, just that love of nature and how it takes time sometimes to realize who we deeply are and how we want to engage with the world of people and ideas and the natural world. And sometimes we do have to just go way back to think, what has been that thread that connects us? So I love that it's that idea of nature as your safe place, and your energy giving place. And through all your work, you've found that to be one of the main drivers of your passion for it. And now you're trying to find even more how to share that with others, which is super exciting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
could go back to yourself as a college student studying civil engineering, what did you expect the world of civil engineering would be like? And what was it actually like? What were the ways, the expectations you had that you were like, yeah, definitely this was met? And what were the ways that it was very different?
Yes. As a civil engineering student, I really enjoyed the coursework. And so that kept me optimistic about the future. But I was worried about being in a cubicle. I was worried about, so, when I actually entered into the professional world, I had some really fantastic mentors. Do not underestimate the power of a good mentor, because oftentimes the thing that stands in the way isn't
Mm,
here, right? We safe, but there's tons of things out there to help you do that. But you really only need to know, a little bit more than someone else to be an expert. So to own it, right, and move forward.
mm,
So, in terms of what it was like when I actually graduated, there was definitely that component of having a little bit of a hard time translating because of the way that I learn. I'm a very much a book learner. So translating it into real life did give me some challenges, but it's a learnable skill, and it built over time, and it became one of my favorite parts of the job. So I would say that it in some ways was what I expected. And I ended up getting so much value from following this gut feeling that this is something I'm interested in and I want to do, and has kind of continued to guide me forward. So do your research in what kind of work you want to do, and know that you can always find flexibility in that. I started in a job that had me in an office from 8 to 5:30. I didn't really take lunch breaks. It was a very small company. We were very busy, and I was in an internal cubicle reading reports all day long. And I knew I wanted to get outside and do more field work. And that's when I shifted to a job that gave me field work. And I loved being out in the field, even though I was on landfills. So, there's ways you can shift things around, especially in the environmental world. There's just so much opportunity. And I think that's one of the coolest things about going into science or environmental work, is that it is such a gold mine of opportunity, right? You can take it any way you want. And yeah, yeah, it can be research based. You can be out in the field, and you may have an idea of what it'll turn out like, and maybe it'll be exactly that, and it's thrilling to you. Or maybe it'll be exactly that, and you're like, oh, I knew this. I should have known this. Like, I shouldn't have done this. What was I thinking? You can always make a change, right? And you learn and you move forward. And I'm so grateful for every job I've ever had, even the ones that were stressful, because I learned something about myself in the process, that this will or will not make me happy. This is how I value my time, or this is what lights me up, and I want a job that lights me up. So, yeah.
Oh, I love how you're pointing out all these ideas of how we evaluate what kind of work we want to do. And so much of it is, like you're saying, it's easy just to get trapped in our heads, but a mentor, like you said, really can open up our eyes to the other opportunities that we might not be aware of just from inexperience, or might be a little afraid of,
Yeah.
due to self-doubt, or maybe need to just improve our expertise on to be qualified for, which is something you can totally do. You can learn it. You went through 4 years of college, you can learn this too. So I really appreciate you pointing out all the different opportunities. And I think even your work history, because you're still a very young woman, to have such extensive work history in your different fields, show how the same passion and the same person can find success in a more outdoor fieldwork based line, in more internal, working on policy and laws, people facing, helping to interact with both the builders and construction workers needing to be in compliance and the public who are going to be affected by the policies. There's so many different aspects that can light you up. And any one of those you could have dove deeper into, but you realized that it was that nature work that you really wanted to get back to and share with people. Katie,
Mhm.
thank you so much for your time today. It has been super interesting to hear more about your background and what brought you there and what's bringing you forward. Tell us a little bit to wrap up. What are your hopes and dreams within your Element Wellness? In 3 or 4 years, if we